Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. This is going to be the last EVE Talk for 2017 and yeah, we'll just keep going. Of course, the plan for 2018 is to keep EVE Talk the same way I'm doing it right now. Taking a weekly look at the market. Hopefully these videos can be helpful for some of you guys, and of course in general I wish you all the best of luck for 2018, whether it's in EVE or out of EVE. Let's get started. As always, we'll take a look at plex first of all, and that's going to be at 40 seconds. There we go. And this was a little bit of a surprise to me, but it might just be sale related. I know that there is a special offer for like dual training, but plex are going down a little bit. So from almost 3.5 million, let's say more closer to 3.4 million, we are now down to 3.25 million on the chart. The prices in Jita, it's 3,279,000 disc. Buyers are at 3,160,000, but of course if we take a look at the player owned trade ups, well, it's not that big of a difference. So 3,278 to 3,224 to 3,225, so less than 3,250,000 ISK for a plex. Lots of fresh sales as well in decent volumes, and the buyers, that's pretty much the same here, almost 3.2 million for plex. So down a little bit. I think it's temporary. I think it has something to do with plex sales and with CCP intervening for the holidays, of course. Let's take a look at the pilot training certificate. That one is going down as well, though. That is quite interesting. Less than 1.4 billion by a decent margin. Less than 1.3 billion even for the sellers, and a little bit over 1.2 billion for the buyer. So if you're looking to train a second character on an existing account, this is obviously your cheaper option compared to just buying plex and putting 500 plex into that training queue. The large skill injectors might give us a little bit of an indication as to what's happening, and here we go. No, actually not the skill injectors, but let's start with the skill extractors. Those are going down together with plex, of course, because of the conversion. You can very easily create extractors from plex. So if one of them, well, if plex goes down, skill extractors are going down as well. Top price almost, let's say 390 million, but probably close to 400. Currently being sold for 360,500,000 ISK. That's definitely down in price substantially. Buyers at 358 as well. Look at that very close margin between the two. So it's pretty obvious that pressure has shown up here. I don't think it's going to go that much lower with buyers at these prices, but it's been a nice little pullback here over the course of the last 10 days or so. For the large skill injectors, though, we can see that that price is going back up, and that is quite interesting. I didn't expect that to happen so quickly, to see basically an increased demand for skill points all of a sudden. Back up above 800 million ISK. Sellers are at 814 million ISK and a half, and then the buyers are at 800 million ISK as well. Buyers going up to 800 million ISK. That does mean that there is quite strong demand, and this over the same period of time we've seen plex go down in price. That is a strong indication of very strong demand for skill points in the market at the moment. The daily alpha injector here flattening out at 62.5 million. I think since you can buy that from the plex store, that this will start to get tied to plex as well, very closely. So 61 million for the sellers, 56 million for the buyers. Volume wise, you can clearly see that this is going down a little bit, and this could be another one of those useful barometers, you know, this first plex stuff category. I do try to use it to give myself a little bit of an idea of what I expect the game to be doing in general, and so higher volumes for daily alpha injectors does mean, I think, higher alpha clone activity, but we'll see how that works out. Of course, it's a pretty new item, so we need to give it a little bit of time as well. And then we have the small skill injectors next. A little bit of a jerk up here that happened like a bit over a week ago to 170 million, and I think we're basically staying around that price. No, actually down a little bit. 164 million for the sellers, 157 million for the buyers. The large skill nickel injectors really jump out as something that is completely different from the general vibe of the market. So quite interesting in my book. And plex, well, if you want to stock up on them, if like me you believe that inflation is once again going to be the name of the game here, then this is a nice little opportunity to purchase some plex if you need to refill your stocks. Let's move on to some minerals next at 5.15. Damn it. There we go. Didn't want to write. Let's get started with titanium. It's not very visible on the chart, but we're clearly trying to bounce off a 4.5 ISK. And in GTAS station, the prices did go up, as you can see here, to 468, not so bad. And here you can see all of this is 3, 2, 8 and 9 jumps out, so this isn't exactly a good barometer to go for that 455. So let's take this filter out. 468 for the sellers, that's pretty obviously up a little bit from last week. The buyers are coming in at 456 as well, buyers up above 4.5 ISK. Good news for titanium, albeit it is pretty shallow, it is just a slight tick up for now. Hopefully this can become a trend, but personally I don't expect this to be so. The reason is I don't really see any major new conflict drivers in nullsec. I don't see a major winter war on the horizon. I could be wrong on that, of course, but I think that basically that is going to be what determines the trend for titanium in the upcoming months. It is whether or not nullsec decides to stop building up, to stop the stalemates, and to actually start blowing each other up a little bit more intensely than they are doing right now. Pyrite, which we know has been playing with that 1 year low for quite a little bit, tried to go back up to 5 ISK, isn't succeeding. You can see here at the tail end that we're actually going back down once again, which, you know, is another indication that minerals are under pressure, way oversupplied at the moment. 477 for the sellers, 469 for the buyers, less than 5 ISK, very close to the price of titanium, which is quite unnatural, but that's just the situation we're in. Titanium, pyrite, less than 5 ISK, between 4.5 and 5 ISK. Very, very cheap, especially for the pyrite. Mexilon could be interesting, and it is. Look at that, going up to 70 ISK here. It is once again the only ray of light for us HiSec miners here, is that there is still a lack of supply of Mexilon coming from nullsec for their own local production. Thus there is this increased demand for this mineral, and it should definitely be your focus. If you're mining, try to focus sources for Mexilon, because the sellers are almost up to 70 ISK, the buyers are up to 67 ISK. You can see that they're following quite closely, and this is an indication of very strong demand coming from somewhere else for that nullsec Mexilon. It is your best ISK per hour if you can mine for that. Next up here we've got Isogen, continuing the same trend as Pyrite, playing with that 1 year low point, trying to stay above 40 ISK, succeeding so far I think. Sellers are at 48.31, buyers are at 40.05, but as the supplies keep coming in here, 80 million, 21 million, another 30 million, it is quite a lot for the market to handle at the moment. And as a result, yeah, prices are at a 1 year low point and staying in that extremely low range for Isogen. 40 to 45 ISK is very low, especially considering that normally you get less Isogen for your mining efforts compared to Mexilon, and Mexilon costs like 30 ISK more. Like 30 ISK more than Isogen, which is pretty crazy situation. We've had that situation with Megasite and Zydran as well for a while, but that has rectified itself. For these HiSec minerals, it's still not good news. Noxium next, doing a little bit of movement here, pretty sharp, but it's if we could ignore this one dip here to less than 300 ISK, it is basically doing the same as Isogen and as Pyrite as well. So whatever you do with these minerals, I think you can do the same for all three of them. It's playing with that 1 year low point, it's bouncing off of that, probably on some nice purchases close to 300 ISK here, in volumes, but it's always coming back down on fresh supplies very quickly. So sellers back down to 308 ISK. Buyers are at 300.56 ISK, and so the biggest danger I see with this chart and with this situation, with basically these bounces at these very low bottoms, is that we could at some point break through the 300 ISK barrier on continued supply that the market doesn't need, and then look out below. Right now 300 ISK is like a bit of a psychological barrier where plenty of investors are apparently saying, yeah, I'm picking up that Noxium for 300 ISK, but with buyers coming in now at 300.56 ISK, and here supply still way above the buyers in volumes, there is this danger that we could actually break through that and that we could find ourselves in a new band of, let's say, 275 to 300, where we're gonna start moving for Noxium. That is my read on the market, but I feel like this is very risky to actually jump in on this. Same with Isogen here, right? Constantly playing with that 40 ISK mark. If the buyers ever get it through their skull to not buy this, and look at that, 81 million, 20 million, buyers 1.6 million, 44 million here, it's not enough, and that is at 40.01. If this ever gets depleted, look out below, we could go quite a little bit lower. So the mineral market still obviously under pressure in general. Zydrine continuing to a 1-year low, heading for 800 ISK where it tries to land. That's pretty obvious on the chart right here. Zydrine selling for 816, buyers at 804. That is also extremely cheap, and I think it is showing that there are just massive supplies coming from nullsec at the moment, and that it is a lack of destruction, a lack of investment in war and in trying to destroy each other's operations. That is definitely a part of the reason why minerals are so oversupplied. Megasite isn't looking any better, also heading for a 1-year low point. If you could actually see this, it's actually going to be close to 900 ISK here, 923 for the sellers, 919 for the buyers. That is extremely cheap Megasite. If you do have plans to produce in the future, I wouldn't blame you for picking up that Megasite and that Zydrine, especially if, like me, you still keep most of your activities to high sec. Then it's impossible to actually really go mine in any quantities for these minerals, and picking up stocks when the chart looks like this, I think is a very good plan, because if something were to happen in nullsec, and this would shoot up in price, you still have these cheap minerals ready for your production, and that is going to be really good for your margins for what you're producing at that time. So potentially here I do see a buy opportunity for Megasite and for Zydrine. And then Morphite, actually shooting up here. That's quite interesting, a little bit unexpected, from 8,350 currently back to 9,000 ISK. So sellers are at 9,500, buyers are at 8,700. Very wide margin. Still pretty big suppliers coming in here. Are we seeing a volume spike? Yes, we are. So this was, I think, an investment move of significant size, because we are talking 4 million units here, 3 million units 2 days as well, and another 4 million units here. So that's quite a little bit of Morphite that's being purchased to drive the price back up from 8,350. No, let's say less than 8,500 to 9,000 ISK pretty easily. On the seller side, it's even 9,500 ISK. So if you bought some of that cheap and you're trying to grab some profits, I wouldn't blame you. But very interesting. Someone made a pretty big move on Morphite for the future there, creating a small sell opportunity. I would prefer to see that above 10,000 ISK. Let's move on to some PI next at 1330. There we go. Broadcast nodes first here. So refined PI material, not much to say here for broadcast nodes, staying well around its own average here. A little bit of movement, but not even trade-worthy movement. So the sellers are at 12,200, maybe a touch above average, but I would say around average. Buyers 11,300, probably a little bit below average. This means that if you're producing construction blocks, in my opinion, you can still sell it, but do so from a sell order. And if you want to start investing in construction blocks, maybe you could pick some up, but I would personally wait for a better opportunity for like less than 11,000 ISK, so that I'm a little bit more sure to actually grab a profit out of that. Although you can see on the chart that that doesn't happen all that often. Next up, so I pressed construction blocks, and we need to take a look at broadcast nodes actually, which is an advanced PI material. Here we can see that we are going to stabilize around the normal average price as well after the refinery increase in price. The refinery bubble, you could say, but there's actually, as you can see from the volumes, quite a bit of consumption that happened there as well. Broadcast nodes selling for 2.2 million, bars are at 2.1 million, and if you look on the chart here, that's around the average normal price. So it took only 2 months pretty much for the market to now absorb the advanced PI material increase in demand due to the introduction of a new structure. Another thing to keep in mind, the blueprints for refineries were the biggest ISK sink ever in the game. So many of those were produced that maybe seeing if this is the introduction of the industry facility, then it might look like, hey, this is an even bigger jump up, but keep in mind that the production will have been far more intense as well, because Nalsec needed to replace all those moon mining facilities, and as a result, you know, any structure that is not as popular as the refinery is just going to create a smaller bubble up when it comes to their introduction. And I don't see anything on the horizon of the magnitude in the same range of magnitude as what the refineries were here. So next up, we've got consumer electronics shooting up a little bit here, quite interesting, from 11,000 ISK, currently selling for 13,500 ISK, 11,000 still for the buyers. So good sell opportunity coming in at 13,500, a little bit above average. You can definitely try to sell that. Considering that the buyers are not moving, my expectation is that this will be short-lived and will drop back down decently quickly. We'll see if I'm right next week. Coolant's next, fuel related, continuing its descent. This is quite surprising to me. 7,500 ISK now. It is going to continue to put more pressure on the price of fuels. 8,200, less than that for the sellers. 7,600 for the buyers. You could slowly keep buying that up, or you could be of the opinion, of course, that the lower demand for fuel is something that's going to become systemic, and that this is just a new normal price for coolants. Enriched uranium is of course in the same situation, trying to get back to 10,000 ISK, but is it succeeding? Sellers at 10,000, buyers at 9,700, decent margin actually for these very low prices. So they are trying to keep dragging that price lower and lower. It's just a lack of demand in fuel related PI at the moment. Integrity response drones, that is yeah, slightly more interesting pattern actually, because you can see the average is around 2.5 million. We once again see the introduction of the refineries, but now we actually broke through that and on the lower end of things. So 2.4 million for the sellers, that's a bit less, and then 2.3 million for the buyers. So you're buying a little bit below average for integrity response drones. Considering the chart might be a buy opportunity for a next introduction, but there is again something to keep in mind here, of course, is that the PI potential across New Eden tends to be decently stable with the player base. If people aren't buying as much coolants, people are gonna move away from that. They'll be looking for better stuff to make, and eventually they might even get to the advanced PI material. So what we might be seeing as well at some point is a shift from fuel related PI planets to advanced planetary PI planets to try and get more ISK for that. And as a result, we might actually end up with a situation like this, where even advanced PI materials will end up a little bit lower in price, because, well, I think that fuel related planets are actually a major part of PI. At the moment we can see the profits from those dropping very quickly, but I've always been a strong advocate of starting out with fuel related PI prices, PI planets, because the demand for that stayed decently stable, because you had this constant consumption of fuel, of course, in all the post towers. Seeing that balance breakdown could actually mean a very interesting year for PI in general. Unfortunately, with lower demand of fuel, it might actually mean a rebalancing on the lower end of the scale for everything. So it's gonna be interesting. Mechanical parts continuing to stay below 10,000 ISK, finding a new trade range. 9,600 for the sellers and 8,900 for the buyers. Very cheap, of course, as it's related to fuels. Nuclear reactors are not doing too hot either. This one is tied to structures though, so it becomes very interesting if we would even get close to 75-80k on the buyers. 88,000 for the buyers, 100,000 for the sellers. I would say, you know, that this could be a good buy if you have the longer horizon of a new introduction for a next structure. Robotics staying below 90,000 ISK, also finding its trade range though, let's keep that in mind. So coolants is a little bit of an anomaly to continue to dive down like that. But robotics currently selling for 91,000, buyers are at 87,500, so around 90,000 is basically the trade range. Still 10,000 coming in here, another 16,000 coming in here. It is quite a decent amount of supply, more than the market needs because of the lower fuel consumption. Self-harmonizing power cores, back on its average for an advanced PI material as expected, a little bit above 2 million, 2.1 for the sellers, 2.07 for the buyers. Not much to say on this one, except for one big volume spike here that hasn't had an impact on the price. That's quite weird. Superconductors on the lower end of things, but pretty stable above 11,000 ISK, so 12,300 for the sellers, probably around average, 11,400 for the buyers, probably a little bit below average. So again here, just like with construction blocks, when it's in the lower end, you know, not advanced, not the hardest stuff to make, but refined PI materials, not related to fuels, you're selling at around average, but the buyers are a little bit below average. Test cultures here, that is of course tied to structures. We can see that from the October-November increase in price here, staying above 9,000. Yeah, 9,500 for the sellers, 9,000 for the buyers. That's okay, and I would say too early to invest in that. I managed to buy a decent amount of test cultures for 8,000 during this period here. I actually did several buys over the months. It required quite a bit of patience to get some profit out of test cultures, but then when they jumped up to 11,000, I did manage to sell all of that for a nice profit. I just think it's too early to do that at this point. And finally, we have wetware mainframes also heading back to 2.2 to 2.5 million, basically around its average. Sellers 2.3 million, buyers 2.2 million, a little bit above both of those, but definitely heading in the same trend that the introduction of refineries on the advanced PI material market has been absorbed. We're back around normal. Let's move on to the Tech 1 chips next at 22 minutes. There we go, and let's go over these. So the first good news, this pattern is the arms race event where a lot of battleships and battlecruisers were introduced, and here for the apocalypse we have a big purchase and we have the price starting to try and normalize. 145 million for the sellers, 120 for the buyers, and a purchase of, let's take a look at that, 67 apocalypses, probably at a low enough price. Would that be an investment? Would that be a nullsec fleet? That's difficult to say, of course. My gamble would be on a group deciding to, well, we're gonna buy ourselves an apocalypse fleet, because it's very unlikely that CCP will do an introduction like that again in the near future, making these really cheap battleships, of course. Next up here we got the Caracal. This is of course, I would say, the example of the low mineral prices showing up in the Tech 1 market. Why? Because the volumes are still decent, right? 250 caracals a day. It's a very popular ship. It's a standard ship that's also used in nullsec as a doctrine. And it's also a good PvE ship in general, so it's a very popular ship, and we can see that it is well below the price of its normal average over the last year or so, selling for less than 9 million ISK, buyers are at 8.2 million ISK, and this I would say is showing what the low mineral prices are doing to the Tech 1 ship markets. Here is the Catalyst next, still staying at a little bit of a premium, so not so bad. 1.2 million for the sellers, 1 million for the buyers. I said last week that you know, if you're looking for something with at least somewhat of a margin, you could look into a Catalyst BPO. Someone said that he was very disappointed by the Catalyst BPO because it took a long time to earn that ISK back. But I have to say, it's just a destroyer BPO that doesn't cost all that much. That's not so expensive. Let's see, maybe I can find it. If we go for industry, view market details, right, it costs like 7.5 to 10 million ISK. It's really not all that expensive to get a destroyer blueprint, and if you're looking to get started in something, well, I would say the catalyst looks like something that you might actually still make a little bit of ISK on. If you're looking for a Caracal blueprint, you're probably not making a lot of ISK at the moment on those. And the reason for that, I would say, is that the Caracal, of course, will also be produced quite heavily in Nullsec and locally, and so you'll have to compete with everyone that is producing for the market that you're trying to sell at. And the Catalyst, for some reason, has this little bit of a margin, and 7 to 10 million ISK is really not that big of an investment to get started. Next up here we get the Drake. That's also, of course, the arms race events, back above 40 million, but still very, very cheap. 42.5 for the sellers, 36.6 for the buyers. Let's take a look at the Ferox. That was not impacted by the arms race event, but we can clearly see that we are well below the average price for Ferox as well. Selling for 45 million, even less than that. Buyers at 41.2 million. Very, very cheap battle cruisers. Hurricane, I think it's arms race here, but it's Minmatar, so it's not as pronounced. And we can once again see we're above 40 million, but it is very, very cheap. 42 million for the sellers, 37.4 for the buyers. The Megatron, very clearly arms race, and in such volumes that the market has yet to absorb that. We're staying at 130 million, and that of course is tied to the fact that Galente are a very popular race. Caldari should be even more popular, but yeah, 134.5 million for the sellers, 122 for the buyers of Megatrons. Very, very cheap ships at the moment, these battleships. The Oracle, no arms race ship, so this is just again the mineral market. We're at a 1-year low for the Oracles, selling for 65 million, buyers are at 61 million. This decline is the mineral decline that you're seeing right here. It's just untenable to try and sell them for more. Here's the Raven, arms race related as well, a dip to less than 130 million, currently selling for 142, trying to recover but still has a ways to go, of course. The Retriever continuing its slow downward slope here to a price lower than 20 million, 19.8 million for the sellers, 18 million for the first buyer coming in. They're trying to drag this down, and I would say it's a show that there is a lot less interest in the Retriever at the moment. My theory was that this might have been a bit of an increased demand because of the resource wars. Another thing is, of course, that this might have been a little bit of increased demand due to the moon mining changes, where you have to actively mine for that. If at first you wanna like feel the water, see how much disruption you're gonna have to deal with, then it's normal that you would take a Tech 1 Retriever for that. And if by now you're finding out, well, you know, it's hardly ever contested when it comes to mining mining a moon, so just, you know, increase to Tech 2 ships, get your Orcals in there, get your Orcas in there, and as a result demand is dropping for the Retriever. The Tempest next, of obviously arms race event related, dipping to 130, currently selling for 139, the first one 123.5 for the buyers. So there's not much to say except that these are extremely cheap now, both because of the mineral prices and because of the introduction of a massive supply during the arms race event. The Thrasher, another destroyer, back up in price, definitely something that is often used in ganks as well, selling for 1.35 million. So that here again, especially if you're newer to industry and you're looking to find a blueprint to invest in, well, maybe, you know, try and grab the Thrasher blueprint, research that one, see if you can still sell them at a decent margin. I think you should, considering the chart and what all the other ships are doing. The Tornado next here, staying extremely low here, even below 60 million, 58.7 for the sellers, 54 for the buyers. Extremely cheap because of the minerals. The Tristan, holding at the current range, 475,000 is for the sellers, 422 for the buyers. Around average, actually doing okay here, the Tristan. The Venture, yep, staying above the average, but not by that much anymore. 220 for the sellers, 192 for the buyers, 220 is around, yep, around here on the chart, slightly above average. This was the introduction of the resource wars, I think. This jump up to almost 300,000 ISK, so it's still a decently popular ship that is being flown. It is of course only a small frigate, so don't expect massive profits there either, and the volumes aren't great here, but yeah, 500 to 1,000 a day, I would say. The Vexor finally, just like the Caracal here, it's actually a very popular ship, not as a Gnostic Doctrine, but because it's an awesome PvE ship with lots of options when it comes to the drones, so you can do content up to the cruiser. You could also kite around with it, and you also have options to go against frigates with flight of small drones and things like that. So here again, a very popular, a very stable cruiser with volumes of around 250 a day, with showing perfectly that we are below average, and this is of course the mineral price showing up. Vexors are selling for 9.6 million, and the first buyer as well at 9.6 million, but most are trying to pick them up for less than 9 here. So Tech 1 market is still very low, very cheap, and some of the battleships and battlecruisers are of course hit by the double whammy of the arms race event and the low mineral prices. Moving on to the Tech 2 market at 3030. That's pretty nice. Here for Tech 2, we are going to continue to try to figure out, are we going to keep paying that premium and are movements down by opportunities, or will moon mining eventually come back to the same supplies, maybe even higher supplies or slightly lower supplies than before the moon mining changes, and will we thus have to regain the trade range that we had before, and that we're still basically paying the novelty premium here that we've been paying for a couple months now. So for the Ares, first look at this chart, back down to 30 million and starting to trade around 30 million. I would say it's a first indicator that we still have to find our trade range. Selling now for less than 30 million, buyers at 26.5, and still 240 of them coming in here at this price range. I would say that there is still room for a lowering closer and closer to the previous trade range. So that's first, but it's still only an indication, right? This could be an oversupply in the area specifically that that could turn out to be temporary, but we'll have to see a jump up in price then at some point. So let's keep an eye on it. The Cerberus next, also trying to slowly go down here, definitely staying below 250 million at this point. 238, 239 for the sellers, 223 for the buyers, and this again is looking like, yeah, we are going to slowly edge back towards that 200 million to 220 million for the Cerberus. The Claw here, trying to break through 30 million. Couple of days it even succeeded to do so. 31 for the sellers, 28.7 for the buyers. This could still go either way for my taste, right? We could still be in the 30 to 40 million trade range, but the pressure is on. You can see that with the data points here that the market is trying to push this one back below 30 million. I would prefer this trade range. I would personally prefer this as well, but of course we are tied to how moon mining actually evolves for that to happen. The Crow next here, below 30 million, and let's see what sellers and buyers are doing. Yeah, 29 for the sellers, still 305 of them coming in, 27.8 for the buyers here. Definitely not the trade range of 35 to 40 million anymore, right? Bouncing off of like 33 million, something like that. What is this? Let's see here. Yep, 32 million, then bouncing back up towards 40 million. Nope. Here I think we are starting to look at a lower trade range, and I think it's going to be the first step. That is my personal expectation, but we'll keep an eye on it. Of course, Crusader showing the same pattern now, clearly breaking through 30 million, 29 for the sellers, 27.4 for the buyers. Will we get back to that 20 to 25 million range? Only the future can tell, of course. But yeah, the bigger ships here, and this is only a destroyer, all are not showing that pattern just yet, but this falls within my expectation, except it's much slower than I thought. But you would of course see the pattern show up in the easiest to produce ships first, which would be the frigates, because they require less material. But the Heretic is staying very expensive at 70 million, 78 for the sellers, 60 million for the buyers. Very wide margin though. You can see that the buyers are not just gonna take this lying down. They're not going to buy heretics for 70 million either. I think they can see the pattern showing up in the frigates first, and they just say, well, you know, producers, get on it for the destroyers, we want some cheaper ones. Here's the Hound trying to get through 30 million as well. With some velocity, it seems. Look at that. Decent amount being sold for less than 30 million. Buyers are able to go down to less than 28 million ISK. So the pattern is definitely, in my opinion, forming amongst the frigates. And then the bigger ships will probably need some time. Here is a slow descent for the Ishtar, but still paying a pretty massive premium here. 264 for the sellers, 248 million for the buyers. But decent supply is starting to form here, I would say. Manticore, again, now breaking through the 35 million ISK. Something to keep in mind. The Manticore has always been a slightly more expensive stealth bomber than all the others, so I would still say that this is confirmation of the pattern. 34 now for the sellers, 32 for the buyers, but it's the same pattern on the chart here. Nemesis next, same thing, now breaking, trying to get to that 30 million ISK here. 31 for the sellers, 28.5 for the buyers. The Pontifex is a command destroyer, very popular and very fun toy as well, and that is still extremely expensive. 91.5 for the sellers, 85 million for the buyers. Buyers are still forced to pay quite a bit of a premium compared to the price before moon mining changes on these destroyers. But here again, the Purifier not exactly succeeding, but some days here trying to get to that 30 million price range. 32 for the sellers, 29 million I should say for the buyers. Not showing it as distinctly, right? We would like to see us dip below the 30 million range. The Raptor, also one that is hesitating a little bit, but as long as we don't jump up above 35 million, I have good hope that that'll be okay. And what's the supply looking like below 35 million? Yeah, definitely pretty decent in volumes. 33 for the sellers, 30 million for the buyers of Raptors. Saber next here, that's another destroyer. So here again we have this hesitation where we have gone below 70 million before, but we are continuing to trade around 70 to 80 million as a trade range, and that would create 69 million as a buy opportunity, and then you could sell at 78 million ISK. But again, I think it's just a little bit delayed on the destroyers, and after that it's going to be the cruisers, etc. So here's the Stiletto. Again, also you can clearly see the evolution towards 30 million. Couple of data points below there as well. Selling for 31.2, buyers at 29 million. The Stork, command destroyer, as expected, extremely expensive still. 90 million pretty much for the sellers, 85 million for the buyers. And then finally we have the Taranis, which is also starting to show the decline. And if you can actually show this here, below 30 million. 29 for the sellers, 27.5 for the buyers. And obviously some of these frigates are still hesitating as well, but this is definitely the first week, I would say, where all frigates, almost all frigates, are confirming the pattern that we are going to go look for a lower trade range, and moon mining is going to normalize across time, with supplies being, well, I'm not sure exactly how close to the previous supplies, but I think it could be in the same ballpark personally. And as a result, now, who is going to produce Taranis when you've got 300 to 400 of them being sold for 29 million? No, they're gonna probably move to the Raptor then, but that is only going to drive the price of Raptors back down. And I think like that, eventually they'll move to destroyers, then to the cruisers. But I am this week definitely seeing this pattern starting to form in the Tech 2 market. Next up, we have the Tech 3 market at 38.10. There we go. As always, we'll take a look at the destroyers here. Confessor, quite interesting. Decent volatility, right? From 40 to 60 million, doing so one time, 2 times, and now the 3rd time here as well. That is quite interesting. If you're looking to trade something, it looks like a very popular tactical destroyer. Might be it. 53 for the sellers, 47.6 for the buyers is right in between, of course, but if you would see buyers dip to 40 million, I would say you could try to pick him up, and then of course on an opportunity well above 50 million you could try to sell. So this is interesting that this keeps happening on the Confessor market. Compare that to the others like the Hecate, which is far more stable, around 50 million. It's up in price a little bit, 52 for the sellers, 46.6 for the buyers, but definitely not something you could make quick ISK on in the last couple of months like the Confessor. The Jackdaw next, also definitely flat around 50 million. And then finally we've got the Zwepel flat just below 50 million, from 40 to 50 million trade range. So selling here for 48, buyers 48.3. Yeah, you're not gonna get massive trades out of that. The Jackdaw 53 million, 47 million for the buyers. Also not something that you're gonna trade all too effectively, but this Confessor chart is quite interesting, and I would say at the moment it's gonna be on a downtrend, but if we play with that 40 million again instead of settling around the 50 million mark, then I would say I might try to purchase some of those. For the cruisers here, the Legion is also going down in price pretty obviously. I think trying to normalize around 150, 159 for the sellers, 145 for the buyers. Yeah, decent margin, could still go either way, right? On just a bit of extra demand, we could actually shoot back up to 180, etc. How many ships are that? Yeah, not even that many, right? It's all 1, 2, 71 at 160. That'll maybe help stabilize things a little bit, but it's been quite unpredictable. This Tech 3 cruiser market. I'm actually surprised at some of the moves that especially the Legion and the Loki have still been doing, despite the fact that CCP's changes were around half a year ago. Here is the Loki chart, for instance. You know, I would say it's trying to normalize at 180 as well, but you can clearly see that sometimes the market shoots the ship up to more than 200 million ISK. So currently 185 million for the sellers, 171 for the buyers, and again 470 of them coming in here should stabilize the price, but we've seen that before. So this could actually turn out to be a buy opportunity as well for the Loki. Then the Proteus, the least popular one at the moment, of course, staying decently flat at around 140, 138 for the sellers, 129 for the buyers. And finally, we also have the Tengu that surprised me a little bit with the late rise up to 180 million, but that is now basically recovering and pretty flat also at like 145, I would say. Yeah, 145 for the sellers. Look at those 500 coming in here, and 135 for the buyers. So here I'm still surprised at what the Loki and the Legion can show us sometimes, but 470 here, Proteus 100 here, a couple hundred here again, Tengu 169, 119, 241. The one caveat on this, right? I like the Confessor chart, I like the Loki chart as well for some trading, the Legion potentially as well. Look at that going down here. If you can purchase them for less than 150, which you can, could be actually a good purchase, but the one danger is oversupply in the Tech 3 market. We've seen that before last year, where before the CCP changes to the Tech 3 ships, they were just lower all the time for more than a year straight, I think it was, and that was due to just massive oversupply of the ships. And be careful of that. Because of some of these numbers do look a little bit high to me here all of a sudden. And then finally, for the extra products at 42.30, we are going to take a look at the Gecko. Once again, a successful investment for me, I would say, because I did invest in some Geckos at around 80 million here or here. No, I think it was here around, yeah, here I think actually, yeah, on this decrease in price. Look at them now. This is of course because they're quite a unique item. 96.5 million for the sellers, 91 million for the buyers. I bought those my Geckos at 80 million ish, so that's already a pretty nice profit. But these are for me now one of the stores of value, one of the protections against inflation. It would be the Gecko drone, and the reason is that unless CCP does something specific where during a special event they make more Geckos available, you can't produce any more of those, and so they are going to go up in price on a lower supply and on general inflation. And so these are, in my opinion, pretty damn good. Is this still the time to hold that, or should you sell here? It's all dependent on what CCP is going to do, but in general here I would say that if you try to buy on dips for the Gecko with ISK that you don't need, you're actually doing a good thing. And for me that's been very successful here. Bought late June for 80 million and currently worth 96.5 million. So this remains a gamble, but as long as you don't go crazy and you actually buy on dips, I think that the Gecko is a very interesting item to look to if you're looking to replace maybe a little bit the function that Plex used to have, which is a lot more difficult, I would say, to do at the moment. It also looks really good and is probably the best non-fighter drone in the game. And that's gonna be it for this week, guys. That's also going to be it for this year. Final EVE Talk of 2017 done. A whole year with one every single Saturday. I'm actually pretty proud of myself that I've managed to do every single one of them, and we'll try to do the same for next year, of course. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you all next time.